On August 14, 2025, the northern seas carried a silence that felt heavier than the ice drifting across its surface. Far above the Arctic Circle, in the dark waters of the Barents and Norwegian seas, 3 Russian submarines prowled with quiet confidence. These were not relics of the past, but the most advanced attack submarines Russia had ever produced. At the head of the group was the Kazan, a Yasen-class nuclear-powered submarine fresh from Severodvinsk's naval yards, bristling with long-range cruise missiles and cutting-edge sensors. Accompanying it were 2 sister boats, the battle-tested Severodvinsk and the newly commissioned Kursk II, named in grim defiance after the tragedy that had once embarrassed the Russian Navy. Together, they formed a wolf pack, a silent spear meant to probe NATO's defenses. Their orders were deceptively simple: move westward from Murmansk, slip past NATO patrols, and test the protective shield that guards the North Atlantic. By reaching the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap, the strategic choke point known as the Guyuk Gap, they could shadow NATO shipping routes and, if war ever came, strike the very arteries that connect North America to Europe. The Russians believed their submarines were ghosts, able to vanish into the black depths, untouchable and undetectable. Their mission was both a rehearsal and a signal, a reminder to Washington and Brussels that Russia still had teeth in the Arctic. But beneath the waves, shadows were waiting. As the Kazan glided westward, somewhere between the icy edges of Novaya Zemlya and the entrance to the Norwegian Sea, its sonar operators detected something faint. A rhythmic pulse, impossibly steady, too perfect to belong to a fishing vessel or a wandering merchant ship. Captain Alexei Volkov leaned over the console, eyes narrowing. Across the network of the Wolfpack, the same contact appeared on the Severodvinsk and the Kursk II. That meant one thing: they were being watched from multiple angles. The hunter had become the hunted. What none of the Russian commanders realized was that they had been shadowed for hours, perhaps days, by one of America's deadliest predators. The USS South Dakota, a Virginia-class nuclear-powered attack submarine, was riding in their wake, unseen, unheard, and unshakable. Unlike the older Los Angeles-class boats, the Virginia was designed for exactly this mission. Its large-aperture bow sonar arrays could paint an acoustic picture of the seafloor, mapping not just the environment, but every movement of enemy submarines. Its pump-jet propulsion allowed it to move without the cavitation bubbles that betrayed older boats. In the silent chess game of the ocean, the South Dakota was a grandmaster. And it was not alone. To the southwest, cruising about 120 nautical miles away, the USS Gerald R. Ford cut across the gray swells of the Norwegian Sea. The most powerful aircraft carrier in the world, it was the centerpiece of a full strike group, escorted by Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and Ticonderoga-class cruisers. Above the waves, their radars scanned the skies. Beneath them, their sonars painted the depths. Helicopters hovered over the sea, dipping their arrays like fishermen casting nets. On the surface, it looked like nothing more than routine NATO patrols. But behind that routine was a carefully constructed trap, a multi-layered cage waiting for the Russians to sail right into it. And they did. When the Severodvinsk attempted to peel away, heading west toward Greenland in the hope of slipping into the Atlantic, the South Dakota tracked every shift of its propeller. The Kursk II, bolder and newer, edged close to the continental shelf, trying to lose itself in the canyons of the seabed. It was an old Soviet trick, hiding in the geography, hoping the sea itself could shield them. But the battlefield had already been prepared. From bases in Iceland and Norway, US P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft arrived, blanketing the sea with patterns of sonar buoys. One by one, the buoys began to sing, each ping bouncing through the dark waters and returning with echoes. Within hours, the sea itself had become a digital cage. The Russians had nowhere to run. To the Russian crews, those pings were like wolves howling in the night. Every sound meant they were being tracked. Every sound meant their cover was gone. Frustration turned to desperation. The captain of the Severodvinsk, irritated by the constant harassment, made a fateful choice. He ordered torpedo tubes 1 and 2 flooded and fired a heavyweight torpedo at what he believed was the shadowing submarine. The decision was bold but reckless. The Americans had anticipated it. The South Dakota deployed a Mark 70 acoustic decoy, a machine that screamed through the water like an American submarine under attack. The Russian torpedo locked onto it and detonated harmlessly, the explosion echoing through the abyss. In that instant, the Russians had revealed themselves. What was meant to intimidate the Americans became a tactical disaster. And then the skies above joined the hunt. The Gerald R. Ford's Air Wing launched F-35C Lightning II stealth fighters, their radars sweeping the skies, ensuring no Russian aircraft from the Kola Peninsula could reach the area. Every attempt by Moscow to send reconnaissance planes was intercepted and turned back before they came close. The ocean above the Russians was transformed into a fortress. MH-60R Seahawk helicopters flew in circles, dipping sonar into the sea, each one ready to drop torpedoes at a moment's notice. The Russian commanders now saw the truth. Every move they made was tracked, not only by sonar, but from the skies and even from orbit. The Kursk II, in a desperate attempt to escape, dove deeper, descending to 600 meters to slip under the buoy fields. For a brief moment, silence returned. Their sonar screens cleared. Relief spread through the control room. But then they felt it. A faint vibration. Unnatural. Too close. Something small, fast, and tireless was following them. An American unmanned undersea drone had locked onto their hull, tracking their every move. The Kursk II was marked. Escape was an illusion. Inside the Kazan, Captain Volkov understood the grim reality. The wolf pack was not the hunter. It was the prey. Every tactic they had drilled, every maneuver they attempted, had been countered and neutralized. Volkov's mind raced through the options. Fighting meant certain destruction. Fleeing was impossible. Drones, aircraft, and sonar buoys had boxed them in. Only one option remained: surface and turn the encounter into a political standoff, where humiliation could at least replace annihilation. Volkov gave the order. The Kazan began its ascent. But as its periscope broke the waves, the sight that greeted them was crushing. Across the horizon stretched the colossal silhouette of the USS Gerald R. Ford, flanked on either side by destroyers and cruisers bristling with vertical launch cells, SM-6 interceptors, and ASROC anti-submarine rockets. Seahawk helicopters circled like vultures, torpedoes slung beneath them. The Russians had surfaced into the center of an American armada. To drive the point home, the South Dakota did something submarines almost never do. It unleashed a powerful, active sonar ping, a deafening thunderclap that rattled the Severodvinsk's hull. To any submariner, this was the ultimate humiliation. It meant the enemy was not just watching you, but painting you as a target, daring you to respond. The Russian crews froze. They knew if the Americans chose to fire, they would not survive. Then the broadcast came, cutting through every channel in the region, echoing in Russian control rooms like a death knell. Unidentified submarines, you are surrounded. Surface immediately or risk destruction. This is your only warning. The voice was calm, cold, and absolute. The Russians obeyed. One by one, they broke through the surface. The Kursk II came first, its massive hull glistening with seawater. Then the battered Severodvinsk followed, its pride already shattered by wasted weapons and constant harassment. Finally, the Kazan itself surfaced, the jewel of Russia's fleet, now reduced to prey under American guns. Destroyers raced to encircle them, helicopters hovered overhead, and on the deck of the Gerald R. Ford, sailors erupted into cheers. Without a single live shot fired, 3 of Russia's most advanced submarines had been forced into daylight. It was not just a tactical victory. It was psychological warfare at its finest. Why did the U.S. Navy react with such fury? Because this was not just an intrusion. This was Russia challenging NATO at its front gate. The Guyayuka Gap is not just a strip of sea. It is the lifeline between North America and Europe, the corridor through which reinforcements and supplies would flow in war. For Moscow to send 3 submarines here was more than a reconnaissance mission. It was a provocation, a message that they could strangle NATO's lifeline if they wished. And when the Severodvinsk fired its torpedo, even into empty water, the Americans saw it as a direct act of intimidation. That was why the U.S. Navy dropped its mask of quiet surveillance and answered with fury. Encirclement was not just punishment. It was a warning that any attempt to cross that invisible line would be met with overwhelming force. The aftermath was humiliation on a global scale. Under American escort, the Russian submarines were shepherded toward neutral waters, their every movement tracked and recorded by satellites, sonar buoys, and NATO command centers. The world watched in real time as Russia's crown jewels were paraded into daylight like criminals caught in the act. In Moscow, the silence was deafening. What was intended as a show of strength had turned into a televised defeat. For Washington, the message was clear. For Moscow, it was a bitter reminder. The encounter would be remembered as the day Russia's wolf pack was broken without a shot fired. The Americans had shown the world that beneath the waves, in the skies above, and on the surface of the seas, their dominance was total. The Russians lost more than submarines that day. They lost confidence, credibility, and the illusion of control in the Arctic. And the ocean itself bore silent witness to a truth that could not be denied. In the Guyayuka Gap, the seas no longer belonged to Russia. They belonged to the United States Navy.